And don't forget, you can also email studio@kfmradio.com, or you can call us and speak to Caoimhe or Donna on the phones on 045 898 999. Labour Senator Mark Wall got in touch with us yesterday to say that on Tuesday he had raised the following issue in Shannon Éireann. He'd been contacted by a 24-year-old woman by the name of Slaney Foley in Athy, who was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 24 in November of 2022. She wants to raise awareness about the condition and also is calling for more support for those who are diagnosed with ADHD in later life. Slaney joins us now on the line. Thanks for taking our call, Slaney, and welcome to the programme.
No worries. How are you on?
Good, thanks, and delighted to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit then about yourself, Slaney, and maybe if we do it in the sense of a timeline, take us back to when you were younger. What was it like when you were in school?
Yeah, so when I was in primary school, I was probably classed as a really good student. I did really well in primary school. I always kind of exceeded, expectations. I was brilliant with my work. I even did extra homework some nights because I knew, I'd have it for the next night. So I just kind of get ahead of myself, and I didn't really need to be taught a lot of things. I kind of knew them as we went along. So I was a fairly good child academically. Now, I did kind of have my issues with, authority figures and teachers and kind of getting along with my peers. I always kind of struggled with getting along with people and kind of making friends and keeping friends and, arguing and stuff like that, as normal kids would do anyway, but it was just more heightened for me. But academically, I was a perfect student and I did really well in primary school. Even when I kind of tell people, look, I have ADHD, or they're kind of asking, why do you act this way, or why do you do this, or why do you do that? They say to me, you don't come across as someone with ADHD. A lot of that comes from when I was younger and growing up. I've been masking my whole life. It's only in recent months that I've actually stopped masking. That for me is just not kind of hiding the things that make me different. And a lot of people do have that stereotype of, someone with ADHD is usually to them, this is kind of what you've been told your whole life, is a hyperactive young boy. The symptoms in girls and women come across very differently than in boys and men. So it just goes completely overlooked. And I know there are a lot of misdiagnoses with, people being diagnosed with things that they don't have, and especially in girls and women. And even from my own experience, I've been, diagnosed with mental health issues, depression, anxiety, all these things. But when I got my diagnosis, then it was all of those symptoms of the things I've been diagnosed with have actually just completely linked back to ADHD. And, that's where I kind of started getting my answers from.
Yeah, take me to your secondary school years then, Slaney, because you say that it became a lot more prevalent, your ADHD, during your teenage years when you started secondary school. Because I suppose when you're younger, you're kind of relying on maybe parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles to notice things that might make you stand out. But as you get older and you're in secondary school, you probably start realising these things about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So when I started secondary school, I kind of went from being, say, a star pupil to being one of, someone who kind of fell behind in school. It wasn't even that I didn't know how to do the work. It wasn't that, I struggled with learning. It was just that I couldn't force myself to do the work because I found it so boring. And that's kind of what it comes down to. And a lot of people with ADHD is that you're so understimulated and bored by a lot of things that it just makes it hard to do. I know most people will find it hard to do things that they don't enjoy or they find kind of boring. But for people with ADHD, it's heightened by 100. When I was in school, I just didn't do my homework. I knew how to do it. I could teach someone else how to do it. I could tell someone else how to do it. But I could not sit down and just do my work. And I always questioned myself and I always wondered, what's actually going on here? What's wrong with me that I can't just do my work? Because I'm well able to do it. It's just that I couldn't sit down and do it. And obviously in secondary school, you're kind of left to your own devices a lot of the time and you're expected just to do your work. And, you don't have the same kind of people over your head as you do in primary school. So that's kind of where I started falling behind. So I wouldn't do my homework. I wouldn't study. I'd go into school late, I'd leave early, I hated school, to be completely honest with you. And, there were so many signs now looking back, and even talking to my family about it, and my mom especially, like we would talk about it and she'd say, yeah, actually that does make sense now, because I have kind of taught her a lot of things about ADHD that she wouldn't have known for, you know, her whole life, because it's more prevalent now, like in recent times, that people are becoming more educated on it, but there's still just not enough education on the topic.
Yeah, when you mentioned there like that you wouldn't have done homework, you would have went to school late, left early, I'm sure then you kind of get branded as being a bad student, a lazy student, somebody who isn't willing to put the effort in. But little do people know that there is something going on kind of deeper under the surface. And you're saying that you were left to your own devices in secondary school. You did go on though to college, third level college, and that's even more independent. You know, you're basically told that you have to just look after yourself here in terms of your studies in college.
Yeah, definitely. So I went on to do a course in law, and it was an honours bachelor degree. Now I was very optimistic about what I could do, because I know I have, you know, I'm an intellectual person. I know things. I'm knowledgeable, you know, and I thought that I could just get on with things. And, you know, I didn't really know about ADHD growing up, or even in my adult life, I never really knew about it. So I thought I was well able for it. But when I went into college, it was a complete shock. Now, when you're filling out your CAO and stuff like that, they do tell you like college is very different to secondary school and stuff like that. But I really underestimated that you could get, you know, an assignment for a month's time. But because of the ADHD, I cannot work unless I'm under pressure. So I would leave my assignments most of the time, 99% of the time, I would leave my assignments until the day that they were actually due. So I remember numerous times I would be in the college library at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and my assignment would be due at 11. And I would start it at 8:30 and I would finish it for 11 and submit it for 11 o'clock. Now, bearing in mind that you wouldn't really get as good points as, you know, other people would be getting, but that was my downfall in college, was I couldn't actually prepare and, you know, work regularly on these things. I had to be under a strict deadline to actually get things finished. So everyone kind of surpassed me in college, and, you know, they were working on things regularly and asking, you know, oh, I was so embarrassed when they'd ask me, oh, how are you getting on with your assignment? And this would be a week before the assignment, or a few days before the assignment. I say I haven't started yet. Like, it's a struggle in that sense that I couldn't understand why I couldn't just do it regularly and do it bit by bit, and, you know, a few hundred words here and a few hundred words there. I just couldn't understand why I couldn't do that. So I ended up just kind of dropping out after 2 years of it. I failed my second year exams. I think I passed one, but I failed my second year exams, and I just didn't really pursue anything else in college after that, because I felt like I wasn't actually able for anything academic because of my experiences in the past.
You mentioned the lack of understanding there, the understanding of why you weren't able to work like other students maybe, and it's worth remembering that at this stage you still hadn't been diagnosed with ADHD, so you were going through primary, secondary and college, all, you know, questioning what was going on in the background. You were diagnosed then in November 2022, so only, 3-4 months ago you got that diagnosis. What exactly does ADHD mean then in your life? How does it affect you, and what are the day-to-day things that would stand out for you?
Yeah, so it is a fairly new diagnosis still. Like, it only what 3 4 months, and it affects me daily. So if it affects my day-to-day life, I struggle with, you know, getting up in the mornings. I struggle with doing the simplest tasks. I could know, like, that the dishwasher needs to be unloaded, and I will just avoid it. Because, like, there's this thing with ADHD, and it's dysfunctional regulation. So with my executive dysfunction, I just cannot physically bring myself to actually do these things that I know I have to do. So a lot of the times, like, my room will get messy, and it drives me mad. It drives me up the wall when I know my room is messy and I know I have to clean it, but I just cannot bring myself to clean it. So it's little things like that. And it's kind of become even worse now in the last couple of weeks, because I'm noticing it in my work. So I work from home and I'm just on the laptop, like, but I work with a company, and I'm doing data entry, like, but I even notice myself, I cannot actually initiate tasks. So when I'm given a task, I can't bring myself to initiate it. Then once I actually start, I can't finish it. And if I do end up finishing it, then I find it so hard to just move on to the next one. So I'm falling behind kind of. I feel a lot of the time that I just fall behind in every aspect of life. So things that people that don't have ADHD are well able to do with such ease, I just can't seem to do that. It would bring you down. Of course, it'd bring you down, but coming to terms with the fact that I have ADHD and kind of forgiving myself as well, learning to actually forgive myself for things that I can't control. That's a big step in, actually getting a diagnosis, and that's something that I'm still trying to learn, and just being kind to myself for the things that I just can't do.
So ADHD, as I mentioned from the outset, it stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And you touched on this a little bit earlier, Slaney, that a lot of people kind of have this perception that ADHD, somebody with ADHD is kind of moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And usually it presents differently in boys than in girls. So with yourself, you mightn't actually notice it from the outside. I mean, that you mightn't notice it that you have ADHD. It's more kind of what's going on in your own head. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. So when I was kind of having my assessment with the psychiatrist, we did talk a bit about that. And a lot of people that have ADHD are physically hyperactive, but there are a number of people then, like myself, who are mentally hyperactive. So although I wouldn't be, jumping around the place or really, really excited or anything like that, my head is constantly like, it feels like there's 100 conversations going on at once. I think that's another stigma around ADHD, is people just assume that if you're not really hyperactive and really excited and really, jumping all over the place, that you don't have it, which isn't true. But there are parts and aspects of it that I'm kind of coming to terms with. And even the likes of when I'm talking, I move my hands a lot. And my whole life, I literally used to force myself to not move my hands, or I'd hold my hands together when I was talking, just so it wouldn't look odd, because I always thought it was a bit odd of myself to be doing that. I didn't understand why I was doing that. But I would be holding my hands together just so I'd stop moving them around. But I've learned the last few months that I don't need to do that. I don't need to not move my hands to seem normal. I don't actually need to be normal, I do have these kind of hyperactive things physically as well, but it's just that I'm kind of letting them out now, whereas before I would always kind of hide them.
Yeah, Labour Senator Mark Wall, who is an Athy resident as well, like yourself, Slaney, he raised this in the Shannon, and the reason that he did that was you had gotten in touch with them to say that there's a complete lack of support for people for ADHD, particularly those who get a diagnosis in later life, like you did at the age of 24. So what are you calling for then in terms of supports and maybe raising awareness of the condition?
Yeah, so I would like to just even make people more aware of the situation, and maybe, like, hopefully there will be more assessments available. And the kind of rigmarole that I went through was that I went to my GP, told her about my symptoms. She referred me to the Thai Mental Health Services. I was actually rejected because they had already given me a mental health diagnosis years ago. So they actually rejected me on the basis that they had given me a diagnosis already. So that made me go private. But going private isn't accessible for everyone. It was a few €100. It was, it's not a cheap process at all. And if you don't have help with that, then it's completely impossible for you to do. But the waiting lists for public assessments is extremely long, ridiculously long. And that's if you are even allowed to go for a public assessment, because like myself, I was rejected. And it's just after causing like questions in my mind as to like how many people in this country like myself have been kind of swept to the side. Do you know that kind of way? Like, I'm sure there are people in this country who have been diagnosed with things that I've been diagnosed with, and it's actually not true, and it's not right, and it's a misdiagnosis, and it's just not looked into properly. Like, I was diagnosed by someone who, I was diagnosed over the phone with past mental health issues, and It's just that there's not enough education around the topic, first of all, and then on the other hand, there's not enough resources. Most people, I'd say, in this country, they just can't access it because it's just impossible to get a public assessment, and then it's impossible to pay for the private assessments for a lot of people as well.
Just want to mention as well ADHD Ireland, who are a fantastic group, and Ken Kilbride is the CEO there. He does great work, and we've spoken to them many times previously. And if anybody listening to this wants to get in contact with ADHD Ireland, their telephone number is 01874 8349. That's 01874 8349, or you can email info@adhdireland.ie. Before I let you go, Slaney, and thanks again for coming on the show this morning. I think you've spoken incredibly well about your condition since you've got the diagnosis back in November 2022. How have things been over the last 3 or 4 months? I'm sure things have started to make a lot more sense now, and you can be yourself a lot more.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So I'm kind of, to put it in the words that I normally use, is I'm getting to know myself now. So for years I didn't really know myself, and I didn't know what I needed, and I didn't know how to ask for what I needed. But now I am well able to ask for it, because I know by getting what I need and getting support from, family, friends, stuff like that, and telling them how things make you feel, it helps you, and it helps other people to understand you as well. So that's how I would put it, is I have just been getting to know myself on a deeper level and learning to understand myself and just be kind to myself.
Good stuff. Glad to hear it. Well, listen, thanks a million for joining us this morning. That is Slaney Foley from Athy, 24 years of age, diagnosed with ADHD only a few months ago, wanting to raise awareness about the condition, but also calling out for more supports to be implemented for those who are diagnosed with ADHD in later life. Slaney, thanks again for joining us, and take care.
No problem. Thanks a million, Owen.